This is like know-nothings out there who read a press clipping out of the AP about some stuff that was put in there by the Senate that amounted to about $400 million in a $60 billion package that all of a sudden says, like, this is a pork package. Those guys should spend a little more time reading the information we send and a little less time reading their political talking points put together by their staff. And they know who they are.
Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey, never one lacking in opinion, giving his opinion on what the House did or rather didn't do when it came to Sandy funding last night. I want to turn to the panel now on this. Richard Brodsky is a former New York State Assemblyman. He is a senior fellow at Demos and a professor at NYU. Dominic Carter is a political journalist and author. And Gian-Carlo Parasuti, a former advisor to both Presidents Bush Jr. and Sr. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you very much. Richard, let me start with you. As a former state lawmaker, you've had to deal with emergency funding, emergency situations before. How vital is Washington backing up the spending of state governments and local governments, and what could the impact of last night?
It's vital on every possible level. It's vital economically, it's vital for tax purposes, it's vital for programmatic reasons, it's vital to show the people who are victimized that the people of the country stand by them. The real question here isn't it whether it's vital. No one disputes that. Was this an accident, or was this another example of the way in which the Republican Party approaches issues in the House? I believe it was the latter. I believe this is not that it was a plan to screw people, but it's evidence of an attitude towards government, governance, what matters, spending, taxes, that is bizarrely out of touch with the way the world functions.
Well, and I was going to get to this later, but we just came through 8 weeks of cut being the main theme in Washington. If you take for Sandy victims out of what happened last night, it's Republicans in the House blocked a $60 billion spending bill. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if that's the political constituency you want to appeal to, then you did very well. If you want to appeal to the people who think that when you see scenes like we see on TV of people literally, as Christie said, starving, homeless, unable to move forward with their lives, and you can go back and say, I stopped in a multi-trillion-dollar budget a $60 million spending bill for the victims of a hurricane. What? Say what? And it goes to the question. These folks are speaking to the narrowest, most reactionary, most out-of-touch elements of American society. They do it brilliantly, but this was no accident.
Gian-Carlo, a lot of Republicans today saying, I'm not very happy with my party leadership in the House. What's your reaction?
Well, as a Northeastern Republican, as a Republican who was affected by Sandy, as much as it pains me to agree with my friend Richard on this, we have little to disagree about. They should have passed the Sandy relief bill. Plain and simple. And it is indefensible that they didn't. It's politically understandable. It was very difficult for the leadership to ask their rank and file to swallow a tax increase that most of them didn't want to swallow, and then on top of that ask them to vote for $60 billion in new spending. That's the reason why they didn't have the vote. That's the political reason why they didn't have the vote. The moral reasons are much harder to justify.
Dominic?
It's disgusting. I respect the point that you just made, but it's absolutely disgusting. And I want to go back to what Richard just said. A key word here, attitude. What's not being said here, there's an attitude in Washington amongst lawmakers that are not from the East, the Eastern Seaboard region, or New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, that those are Northerners. They waste money, they blow money. We're going to stop all their wasteful spending. There's an attitude in Washington that that's exactly what happens.
Among Republicans.
Among Republicans. I'll say lawmakers, but more among Republicans. And thus, every disaster that comes along, it's no surprise they voted this down. It's they didn't vote at all. It's disgusting. But it's a way of life in Washington.
One point, right? So we all heard the rhetoric. Some of it was overheated. Some of it was justifiably overheated. But the reality is this bill is going to get passed, and it's going to get passed this week. So we can bloviate all we want here about it. That's the fact.
But tell that to the people that don't have heat tonight, or they don't have something to eat. It's not coming a minute too soon.
And let me just clarify, all that's going to pass this week is $9 billion for flood insurance, to pay flood insurance claims. You're waiting at least until January 15th before the other $51 billion hangs on the ledger, and there's no guarantee The new Congress is going to pass it.
What did Bobby Kennedy say? Don't get mad, get even? That's the message of this thing. If you keep empowering as a nation people like this, you will get results like this.
I got to get some water because you and I are starting to agree a little bit too much.
There's hope for you.
But I agree with his point. Americans that say, oh, I'm not interested in the political process, they're all crooks, they don't know what they're talking about. If this doesn't get you angry to get involved, I don't know what will. And the only thing that a politician understands is that if you, I'm sorry, Richard. I'm sorry, Richard. The only thing a politician understands is the threat of them being removed from office. That's why they're all jumping now to get this done.
Is this an anti-New York thing? Because
Yes.
I remember the hiccups getting funding after 9/11 and for 9/11 responders.
It's hard to imagine, and not to sound crass about it, but it's hard to imagine either a deeply red state that was impacted by a tragedy of this magnitude or a place like New Orleans, which has a substantial minority population. If those were the demographics affected by a tragedy like this, I think you'd have a Republican Party that was singing a very different tune.
Is it because we're talking about New York and New Jersey and the New York metro area, or because we're talking about a relatively blue portion of the country? Would the same thing happen in the LA area of California or in Massachusetts?
Don't focus on the victims, focus on the perpetrators, the perps. The perps here are the ones with the attitude, as Dominic says, with a political philosophy that makes this a political plus for them. That's the core of the problem. Every party has its share of idiots. Every party has its share of crazy people. But when the majority of the governing party decides to abandon the most basic and primal instincts and responsibilities we have towards each other as a community, something's wrong that's deeper than the issue that they failed to act on.
Want to respond as a
Sure.
Republican?
I mean, it's not as simple as that. Again, this was, and I'm not defending the action because they're indefensible. I'm merely trying to shed my opinion or light on the matter, and that is to say that this was all done in the context of the fiscal cliff. Absent the fiscal cliff, this bill would have been passed. But the leadership in the House, rightly or wrongly, I would say wrongly, could not ask their members to accept a tax increase and then also accept the $60 billion spending package.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue this conversation after the commercial, and we want you to continue the conversation online. Head to Facebook and Twitter to sound off. What's your reaction to Congress's failure to act on Sandy funding? We're going to hear some of your responses when we return. Stay with us.
It's been just disgraceful.
I can't imagine why they would stall on something so important.
Without that money, a lot of things would be a lot worse.
We need it, and we need it fast.